This is where I'm going to briefly talk about my book, the soon-to-be-released book. One of the challenges I faced in this project was the framing of a structure within which to discuss and to present this project. I was able to locate quite a few books in terms of books that I call theory books, books that are bringing theoretical frames of references or cultural analyses that were supporting these literary works. How did this field of philosophical contemplation come into being? Where is this theory coming from? It's coming from the writers themselves. The writers back in the 70s and 80s, the writers perceived that they were writing, but there was no critical academic feedback. So they themselves started to produce essays about their writings. They themselves created their own literary critical essays, their own literary writings, their own essays. In a sense, they broke the traditions of subordination and went their way, formed their own forms of analysis and started to gaze on and assess each other's writings. This was a late 20th century phenomena. Then there was a lull in the 1990s, and now it's back full force, especially post 2007 to 10 onwards, where the writers continue to self-analyze. They write to the issues and they secure the direction and exploration of their ideas. So my book is, in my book, the introduction is basically about this phenomena, the ability to self-assess. And I provide 3 directions that I observe in these essays. The 3 directions are called A Mulher Negra Tem História, Black Woman Has a History. The second direction is called Escrevivência, which is probably sitting right now as the first full-blown theoretical reference coming from Latin America itself, and it's Brazilian. It was proposed by Conceição Evaristo, who currently features as probably the main Black woman writer in Brazil. You can see the word escrever, to write, and vivência, which is experience, existence. And she combined the two. So it basically means something along the lines of, I write, therefore I am what I write. And I think that's pretty much the basis for it. There are a lot of elaborations and contemplations being done right now, a lot of critical work being done around this concept in relation to her work, but also in relation to other works in Brazil and across Latin America. So this of course is it's a very important moment for the genre, because finally we have something upon which to base and to launch it ourselves. So there are 3 heroines, and then we have the writers. The book brings a lot of Afro-descendant writers, many of them very almost unknown, from Nicaragua, Colombia, and so on. So I have 3 devices that I forced together. I forced them to come together as a way of understanding what is happening in writings, what they represent, where they're coming from, and also a concentration on the Black female subject, seeing this place or this point or this presence as a source of enrichment and expansion, but on her own terms. My research confirms that rather than there being a deficiency in presence and production, it's the exact opposite. It's just that it takes time to find and time to set up. Her experiences historically were devastating, and she was silenced, but her resilience and visibility is in the writing. And that is key to unlocking the magnitude of the anguish and the beauty that's in her story. So this is where ideas of heroism emerge and take flight as nations, communities, writers, and readers rally to tell and write and read her story. And that is what is happening today. The intention behind Mayaya Rising is to compensate for the deficit in regional appreciation and presence. It plans also to provide methodic ideas, display successes and challenges about what to do in order to promote and establish permanently Afro-descendant female icons. I tried in this book to bring the bigger picture to the table, so let me know if I succeeded. Thank you so much.
I appreciate your discussion of your process of research and writing, thinking about your methodology and how you think about your analysis, what that means for not only your research, but what it means for exam lists, what it means to write a dissertation. So I appreciate the ways in which you were very transparent about your own work, but what that means through the various stages of academic's career or life. But I was also struck by the distinction you made between history and literature. And from what I think I understood, history as being kind of telling a story of violence, telling a story from a particular perspective, telling a story that silenced various kinds of voices, but literature allowing for something else. And so because I know you want us to buy the book, but I am curious about some of the literature that you feature, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about one of the novels as an example of how literature does it differently, or how literature allows literary scholars to think about history differently. And I heard you talk specifically about the heroine, who we think of it as a trope in literature. And so I just was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the distinctions between literature and history, and what some of the writers that you feature in your book, how they're either rewriting history or rethinking history, or allow us to completely circumvent history in different ways. Thank you.
Oh, okay. That's all part of the fun part of the research, trying to figure out how to explain what you do. And then you hope by the end of the book, they got it, So there's a book that I always use as a reference, and it's Yolanda Arroyo's Las Negras. I don't know how many people are familiar with that one. It's a collection of 3 short stories. It's been translated into English, and it's pretty popular because the writing is very simple, and it works for both undergraduate and graduate levels. You can advance the discussion into that philosophical cloud that we love at the PhD level, or you can bring it down, right down, so that your undergraduate class can benefit from understanding what happens when she writes her story, what makes it different. For example, what happens to the white male character in the book when suddenly there's a shift and it becomes a Black female-centered universe in which we are observing what she is thinking. Because remember, in those days, she couldn't read. It was forbidden for her to read and write on the penalty of death, but they never took her thoughts away, So just to answer the other part of your question, how do you write things back into existence? The writers of today, like Conceição Evaristo and Yolanda and Mayra Santos and Eulalia Bernard, they have found a way to assume, to allow the narrator or the presence in the book. There's this mixing. Sometimes we can almost say it's the author. That's fine. That's okay. They found a way to allow or to write history from a post-contemporary positioning. Today it's 2022, but they're very, very interested in the elaboration of a historical presence, because there seems to be a need for that, which is why you have novels like Daughters of the Stone, Dalma Llanos Figueroa, or you have Ana Gonçalves de Feira de Cor, or you have Las Negras, or you have Saita, which is the other book that Yolanda wrote. There's this desire to establish historical presence, because if you can insert her into that final battle that Zumbi dos Palmares, the Zumbi is the great warrior in Brazil, had, again, with the colonizers, the one that brought him down, you know, and if you can insert her back, you know, she was there, you know, they were there. Women were there, they were warriors there, but they were totally ignored in the recording, in the writing up of those events. And I think that's the motivation here, that kind of like desire to put her there, you know, where she was originally. That changes everything. And I think that strategy is only possible in literature.
Crystal had asked, what has been the reaction to your work? Has there been any pushback?
Oh, you always say this. Yeah. I would say things are different now, and there are other kinds of issues. I recall going up when I got the campus interview. I met several groups of faculty, and back then, you know, this is early 2000s, the idea that an ABD, and I was ABD, back then they used to take ABDs, I don't think they do anymore, almost never, right? I was ABD, and I kept bumping into the same question. It's something along the lines of, do you think you'll be able to function at full capacity in 2 languages? Why are you in 2 languages? How is this working? What is this research? And I couldn't understand why. My answer was always the same. It's 2 languages, but for me, it's 1 line of research. It just so happens that some of the writers that I'm looking at, you know, I'm doing Black women writers in Latin America, some of them happen to live and dwell in Brazil. It never occurred to anybody, faculty back then, that the question itself was totally irregular in terms of the fact that there's no way anybody can work 100% in 2 areas, in 2 fields, which is in the Spanish program and Portuguese. That's impossible. Physically, you just can't. So the irregularity was started way before I got there, from the presumption that the expectation was that I would be 100% in both areas. And when you're joint faculty, and there are many positions coming out, you know, that require you to operate in more than 1 area or produce in more than 1 area. It has its issues, it has its problems, and you have to be careful and make sure also that people understand what you do. And that, I think, is the challenge in the profession in terms of where it is today. The expectation is people want 2 or 3 skills, and they also want 300% of you. And that is totally impossible.